Ontario's Infectious Disease Emergency Leave was put in place March of 2020. This allowed for workers who take time off for pandemic-related reasons, and it also allowed employers to adjust the hours and pay of their employees. The paid sick days element has been extended to the end of March 2023, but other components have now expired. So here joining us to share more about workers' rights for temporary leaves and layoffs is our labor and employment lawyer, Lior Samfiru. Good morning to you, Lior.
Good morning, Marianne.
So let's go through all of this because over the course of this pandemic, we've had to follow the bouncing ball, the changing rules. So take us through what has been extended and what has now come to an end and how this all affects workers who have been off during this pandemic.
Sure, Marianne, and certainly I know it's been very confusing for employees. So one of the components of the Infectious Disease Emergency Leave was the ability of employers to put off employees off work because of COVID-19. And for some employees, that means that they've been off for 2 years now, since March of 2020, over 2 years. And that date, the date by which they could be placed on a leave, has now expired. It expired at the end of July. That means that those employees are no longer on an infectious disease emergency leave, and their employer must recall them back to work now, to the same job, same pay, same responsibilities that they had before. That's obviously very good news for these employees, which can and should expect to be back to work effective this week. Now, what's been extended, of course, is what we call the paid sick days. If you have to be off work because of COVID-19 or testing or vaccinations, you will get up to 3 paid sick days. That's been extended till March of next year. But for many employees, I think it's going back to work time now.
Yeah, and as I saw there on your board, if an employer does not call an employee back, they are considered terminated. They're eligible for a severance. So what happens then if an employer decides to keep an employee on a temporary layoff, even though the job protection has been expired?
And Marianne, I've already seen that starting to happen. Employers saying, well, I know we're supposed to call you back to work, but we're not ready for you yet. Well, that's not permissible. An employer cannot just put off an employee on a temporary layoff now. There's no automatic right for that layoff. That's a change to the terms of employment. So an employee that's not being called back to work or that's been placed, quote unquote, on a temporary layoff now can treat that as a termination and get their full severance. That severance can be as much as 24 months' pay. So that's not something employers can do. In fact, there could be penalties beyond the severance that employers would pay in that situation. So again, the expectation is employees get back to work and get back to work now.
Yeah, and that's why it's great for employees to know what's out there because some might not be aware that they don't necessarily have to stay off. Let's talk more about layoffs. You know, Shopify recently laid off 10% of its workers, claiming they misjudged the growth of e-commerce. They're offering employees 16 weeks pay plus an additional week per year of tenure. Is that enough severance pay for a mass layoff like that?
For many employees, Marianne, that's not even going to be close to being enough. Now, with the mass layoff, there are minimum severance entitlements, which could be 16 weeks in that situation. But a person's full severance, their full termination entitlements, can be several times that. In fact, as I said before, it could be as much as 24 months' pay. The factors are the person's age, their position, and the length of their employment. So if someone's been there for 20 years, is owed 24 months severance, and they're offered 17 weeks severance, that's not even close. That's a wrongful dismissal. So those employees should certainly get some legal advice to understand what their rights are, which could far, far, far exceed what they are being offered.
And so layoffs are one thing. Let's talk about people choosing to leave on their own. According to Stats Canada, we know people 55 years of age and older are retiring earlier than before, likely because of the pandemic. So what kind of compensation are they entitled when they retire?
So a legitimate retirement that you do voluntarily and unilaterally, if that happens, you are not owed any compensation or severance or any particular additional payment from your employer because you're choosing to do that. Now, you may have rights under a pension plan that you qualify for, and that could be significant, but the employer otherwise does not have to pay you anything if you choose to retire. But here's the key. It has to be voluntary. Your employer cannot tell you that you have to retire. They cannot suggest to you that you've come to the retirement age. We don't have mandatory retirement anymore. That's long gone. So you can work till 55, 65, 75, or beyond. And an employer that tries to force a resignation, a termination, a retirement on you when you're not ready, that's a human rights violation. That's age discrimination. But if that's not happening and you're choosing to make the move, you say, I don't want to work here, I've had enough, I'm leaving, that's fine, of course. But at that point, severance is not owed.
On your own terms is always the best way. Thank you again to our labor and employment lawyer, Lior Samfiru. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.